Dr. Mingy Park rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the clock on her desk. 3 in the morning again. She had been working late shifts at the Deep Space Monitoring Station for almost 2 years now, and every night was the same, nothing but silence. From the stars, the galaxy was quiet. Too quiet, Minji knew the stories from the history books. Long ago, when her grandmother was young, space had been filled with signals. Alien civilizations talked to each other across the void. Trade ships sent messages about their cargo. Military fleets coordinated their movements. Scientists shared discoveries between worlds. The universe hummed with life and activity. But that was before the Great Retreat. One by one, the advanced species had discovered something that changed everything. They learned how to build perfect virtual worlds. Inside these digital paradises, they could have anything they wanted. No pain, no hunger, no death, just endless pleasure and comfort. Why struggle with the real world when you could live in a perfect dream? The first species to retreat were the Veltar. They had been the galaxy's greatest explorers, mapping star systems and discovering new forms of life. But once they tasted virtual paradise, they lost interest in exploration. Their ships stopped flying, their signals went silent. They sealed themselves in their cities and never came out. The Quinari followed next. They had been brilliant scientists, always pushing the boundaries of knowledge. But in their virtual worlds, they already knew everything. There was no need to learn or discover. They simply existed in perfect, unchanging bliss. Species after species made the same choice. Real life was hard. Virtual life was easy. The decision seemed obvious. Minji adjusted her headphones and listened to the cosmic background radiation. It was just random noise now, static from dying stars and empty space. The communication frequencies that once carried messages between worlds were silent. She was part of the monitoring program, one of the few projects still trying to listen for signs of life in the galaxy. Most people thought it was pointless. Why look for new civilizations when the old ones had given up? Why search for signals when everyone had retreated into their digital dreams? But Minji believed there had to be someone out there, someone who still cared about the real world, someone who still wanted to explore and discover and grow. Her supervisor, Dr. Chang, often told her she was wasting her time. Face the facts, Park, he would say. The galaxy is dead. Everyone who matters has moved on to better things. We're just watching over an empty house. But Minji could not accept that. She had read about the old days, when species worked together to build amazing things, when they explored dangerous places and made incredible discoveries, when they faced challenges that pushed them to become stronger and smarter. All of that was gone now. The galaxy's greatest civilizations sat in their perfect virtual worlds. Content to dream forever. The monitoring station was built on a small moon orbiting a gas giant. It was not a comfortable place to live. The air was thin, the gravity was weak, and the nearest city was 3 days away by ship. But it was quiet and far from the busy inner worlds, where most people lived. Minji shared the station with 5 other researchers. They took turns monitoring different sections of the galaxy, hoping to catch any sign of activity. But their equipment mostly detected the same things over and over. Pulsar signals, solar wind, the occasional automated beacon left behind by some. Long-dead civilization tonight felt different, though. Mingy could not explain why, but she had a feeling that something was about to change. She had been getting strange readings from Sector 7G, an area that most people considered worthless. The star systems there were young and unstable. No advanced species would want to live in such a dangerous place. She pointed the station's main antenna toward Sector 7G and began a deep scan. The first few minutes showed nothing unusual. It's just the normal background noise of space. Then she heard it. It was faint, almost lost in the static, but it was definitely artificial. Someone was transmitting a signal from the outer rim of the galaxy. Minji's heart began to race. She quickly recorded the signal and ran it through the translation programs. The message was simple but clear. Hello, we are here. We want to learn. The signal was primitive by galactic standards. Whoever sent it was using old technology, probably. Just discovering how to send messages between star systems. But there was something in that simple message that made Minji smile, hope, curiosity, the desire to reach out and connect with others, she had found them. Someone who still cared about the real world. Someone who still wanted to explore and discover. Someone who refused to give up. Minji reached for her communication device to report the discovery, but then she stopped. Her supervisor would probably dismiss it as background noise. The Galactic Council would file it away and forget about it, but this was too important to ignore. After thousands of years of silence, someone new was trying to speak. The void was finally answering back. Ambassador Kale walked through the long hallways of the Hegemony Council building. His forearms moved in perfect rhythm as he carried the contact report. After 3 days of analysis, they had finally traced the primitive signal to its source. The beings called themselves humans. They lived on a small blue planet in Sector 7G, orbiting a yellow star they called Sol. Their technology was basic, maybe 1,000 years behind the galactic standard. But somehow, they had managed to send a message across half the galaxy. Kale had been chosen for first contact because he was good at handling primitive species. In his long career, he had guided dozens of new civilizations into the galactic community. The process was always the same. Make contact, offer them paradise, watch them accept it gratefully, and file the paperwork. He entered the council chamber, where the other ambassadors were waiting. The room was beautiful, with walls made of crystal that showed images of distant stars. The ambassadors sat in chairs that floated in the air, their bodies relaxed and comfortable. "The humans are ready for contact," Kale announced. "I will begin the standard protocol tomorrow." K. Elder Voss, the oldest member of the council, nodded slowly. "Another primitive species reaching for the stars. How refreshing. It has been centuries since we had a new addition to our community." "What do we know about them?" asked Ambassador. RIN.Kale activated a holographic display that showed the human homeworld. "They are a young species, maybe 10,000 years old. They have only recently developed space travel. Our planet has many problems: war, disease, poverty, environmental damage. Perfect candidates for virtual paradise." The other ambassadors murmured agreement. Every species went through the same struggles before learning that virtual worlds were better than real ones. The humans would be no different. "Begin the standard offer," Elder Voss said. "Full virtual paradise, unlimited resources, perfect health, eternal life. They will accept within a few days." Kale bowed and left the chamber, went to his office and prepared the communication equipment. Making first contact was always exciting, even if the outcome was predictable. The quantum communication link connected after several minutes. The image that appeared on his screen showed a young human woman sitting in what looked like a simple room. She had dark hair and wore clothes that seemed uncomfortable compared to the flowing robes most civilized species preferred. "Lo," she said in the human language. "I am Hannah Kim. I speak for the people of Earth." Kale activated his translator and spoke in the formal tone he used for all first contacts. "Greetings, Hannah Kim of Earth. I am Ambassador Kale of the Hegemony Council. We have received your message and wish to welcome you to the galactic community." Hannah smiled, and something in her expression surprised him. Most primitive species were frightened during first contact, but she looked excited, almost eager. "We are honored to meet you," she said. "We have so many questions about the galaxy. Are there many other species like us? What have you learned in your travels? What wonders exist beyond our small world?" Kale paused. It had been a long time since anyone had asked him about wonders. Most species he contacted only wanted to know about safety and comfort. "The galaxy is vast," he said carefully. "Contains many species, most of whom have found peace and contentment. We offer the same to you." He activated the presentation he had used thousands of times before. Images of beautiful virtual worlds filled the screen. Perfect cities where nothing ever went wrong. Endless gardens where every flower bloomed forever. Oceans that were always warm and calm. "We can give you all of this," Kale explained. "No more war, no more disease, no more death, no more struggle or pain. You can live forever in perfect happiness." Hannah watched the presentation carefully. When it ended, she was quiet for a long moment. "That is very generous," she finally said. "I do not think we are interested." Kale's translator must have made an error. No species had ever refused paradise. Perhaps you do not understand, he said. We offer complete fulfillment. Everything you could ever want or need. Perfect existence with no problems. We understand. Hannah replied, but what is the point of paradise if you did not build it yourself? How can you call it living if there is no risk of dying? The questions hit Cale like a physical blow. He had never thought about such things. Paradise was paradise. Why would anyone choose struggle over comfort? But your world has so many problems, he said. War, suffering, environmental damage. We can fix all of that. We prefer to fix our own problems, Hannah said. That is how we grow stronger. That is how we learn. Cale stared at the screen. In all his years of first contact, nothing like this had ever happened. Species were supposed to want paradise. They were supposed to be grateful for the offer to escape their troubles. You choose hardship over happiness? He asked. We choose growth over stagnation, Hannah answered. We choose the real thing over a perfect dream. The communication ended, leaving Cale alone with thoughts he had never had before. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered a question he had not asked in centuries. What if she was right? Captain June Lee stepped off the transport ship and onto the crystal platform of the Galactic Core Station. The sight before him took his breath away. The station was bigger than Earth's largest cities, built from materials that seemed to glow. With their own light, towers twisted into impossible shapes that defied the laws of physics he knew. Gardens floated in midair, their flowers blooming in patterns that hurt to look at directly. But something felt wrong. Despite all the beauty, the place felt empty. It's like a museum where no one came to visit. Dr. Yuna Choi walked beside him. Her eyes wide as she took in the alien architecture. As humanity's top cultural specialist, she had studied every available record about galactic civilization. But seeing it in person was different from reading about it in books. Remember what we discussed? She whispered to June as they approached the Grand Assembly Hall. We are here to learn, not to judge. These species have achieved things we can barely imagine. The assembly hall was enormous, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch forever into darkness. Representatives from dozens of species sat in floating chairs arranged in perfect circles. Oh, their bodies were different. Some had multiple arms. Others had wings. A few looked like living crystal formations. But they all moved with the same slow, careful grace. June had expected excitement about meeting humanity's first diplomatic mission. Instead, the aliens watched them with mild curiosity. Like scientists observing insects, Elder Tan of the Meridian Collective spoke first. His voice was soft and musical, translated by the Universal Communication System. Welcome, humans of Earth. We have heard about your interesting response to our standard offer. We are grateful for the opportunity to learn about your civilization, June replied, using the formal diplomatic language Yuna had taught him. We hope to build friendship and understanding between our peoples. Several aliens made soft sounds that the translator identified as gentle laughter, not cruel, but the kind of laughter adults made when children said something naive. Friendship, repeated Ambassador Vel of the Quinari. We remember that concept? It was important to us once. Before we learned that individual relationships were inefficient compared to collective consciousness. Yuna stepped forward. Could you tell us about your achievements? We would love to hear about your greatest accomplishments. The question seemed to confuse the aliens. They looked at each other as if trying to remember something from long ago. Solved hunger 3,000 years ago, Elder Tan said slowly. We eliminated disease after that. Death became optional around the time we perfected virtual reality. We mapped every star in our sector and cataloged every useful resource. That is incredible, June said. What are you working on now? What are your current goals? The silence that followed was uncomfortable. The aliens seemed genuinely puzzled. By the question? Goals, asked Ambassador Vel. We have achieved everything worth achieving. Our people live in perfect virtual worlds, where every desire is fulfilled instantly. What more could we want? But what about exploration? Yuna asked. Discovery? Learning new things? We have explored everything worth exploring, said Elder Ton. We have learned everything worth learning. There are no more questions that need answers. June felt something cold settle in his stomach. These beings had technology that seemed like magic to him. They'd solved problems that humanity was still struggling with, but they had also given up on something fundamental.
What about
Art, he asked. Music. Stories. Do you still create new things? Aliens exchanged looks again? Our virtual worlds contain all possible art, Ambassador Vell explained. Every song that could ever be written, every story that could ever be told. Our people experience perfect beauty constantly. But do you make new art? June pressed. Do individuals still create things that have never existed before? That would be inefficient, Elder Tan said gently. Why create something new when perfection already exists? The conversation continued for hours, but every topic led to the same conclusion. The galactic species had achieved everything they thought was worth achieving. They had solved every problem they thought was worth solving. They had answered every question they thought was worth asking, and then they had stopped. We understand your confusion, Ambassador Vell said as the meeting ended. Young species always think they need to keep striving. You will learn, in time, that struggle is unnecessary. Paradise is waiting for you when you are ready. As they walked back to their transport, Yuno was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. They have everything, she said. Perfect health, unlimited resources, eternal life. They have solved every problem we face on Earth. But they have lost something too, June replied. They have lost the reason to get up in the morning. That night, June sent a message back to Earth. It was not the report that the diplomats were expecting. Instead, he wrote about a galaxy full of species that had forgotten how to dream. They offered us paradise, he wrote. But paradise is not a place you go to. Paradise is something you build with your own hands. They have forgotten that the journey is more important than the destination. Within days, his message was spreading across Earth's communication networks. Humanity's response was swift and clear. They would not accept paradise. They would build their own. The stubborn species had made their choice. Dr. Sunho Kong sat in his office watching the reports flood in from across the galaxy. 6 months had passed since humanity's first diplomatic mission to the galactic core, and the effects were spreading faster than anyone had expected. His communication device buzzed constantly with messages from alien worlds. Species that had been silent for centuries were suddenly asking questions. The Arxel had emerged from their virtual paradise to request information about human exploration techniques. The Zephyrians had begun research projects for the first time in 300 years. Even the ancient Meridian Collective was showing signs of activity. This is impossible, Dr. Boranam said as she entered his office, carrying another stack of reports. The cultural impact assessments predicted it would take decades for any meaningful change. But look at this. She handed him a datapad showing communication traffic between star systems. The graph showed a sharp spike in activity that had started just after humanity's diplomatic mission. The Veltar have launched their first exploration ship in 2,000 years, Bora continued. They are sending it to a system they had marked as uninteresting centuries ago. They want to see what they might have missed. Sunho shook his head in amazement. What started this? All we did was refuse their offer and ask some questions. That is exactly what started it, Bora replied. We asked questions they had forgotten how to ask. We chose struggle over comfort. We reminded them that there might be value in the journey itself. The communication device buzzed again. This time it was an urgent message from the Hegemony Council. Sunho read it quickly and felt his stomach drop. What is it? Bora asked, seeing his expression. The Council has declared humanity a disruptive element, he said. They are imposing trade sanctions and banning human ships from certain sectors. They want to contain our influence. Can they do that? They control most of the galaxy's resources and trade routes, Sunho said. If they want to isolate us, they have the power to do it. But even as he spoke, new messages were arriving. Species that had been passive members of the hegemony for millennia were questioning the decision. The Quinari had formally requested a review of the sanctions. The Zephyrians had announced they would continue trade with humanity regardless of council policy. They are afraid, Bora realized. The council members who profit from keeping everyone comfortable and passive, we are threatening their system. Over the following weeks, the galaxy began to split into two camps. The traditional powers, led by the Hegemony Council, wanted to maintain the status quo. They argued that humanity was dangerous, that their ideas would lead to chaos and suffering. But a growing number of species were beginning to remember what they had given up. The Arxel started closing their virtual reality centers. Young Veltar began volunteering for dangerous exploration missions. The Quinari reopened their research laboratories and began asking questions about the universe again. The changes were not always peaceful. On some worlds, those who wanted to return to the real world clashed with those who preferred virtual paradise. Ancient conflicts that had been resolved in simulations spilled back into reality as species rediscovered their capacity for disagreement. Are we responsible for this? Bora asked one evening as they watched news reports of protests on a dozen worlds. Did we cause this chaos? We did not cause it, Sunho replied. We just reminded them that they had a choice. What they do with that choice is up to them. The most dramatic change came from an unexpected source. The Meridian Collective, the oldest and most respected civilization in the galaxy, announced that they were abandoning their virtual worlds entirely. Elder Tan, who had seemed so content during the diplomatic meeting, sent a personal message to humanity. You asked us what our goals were, the message said. We could not answer because we had forgotten how to have goals. We had forgotten that existence without purpose is not existence at all. We are returning to the real world to remember what we lost. The announcement sent shockwaves through the galaxy. If the Meridian Collective could abandon paradise, then maybe paradise was not as perfect as everyone thought. But the Hegemony Council was not finished. They began spreading propaganda about the dangers of human influence. They claimed that humanity's ideas would lead to war, suffering, and death. They offered even more perfect virtual worlds to species that were wavering. Choose safety, their broadcast said. Choose peace. Choose comfort. Do not let the humans drag you back into the darkness of struggle. Some species listened. They sealed themselves even more tightly into their virtual worlds and cut off all contact with the outside universe. But others made a different choice. The Zephyrians began building new cities in the real world. The Arxel started teaching their children about exploration and discovery. The Quinari published research papers about the value of uncertainty and challenge. The galaxy was waking up. Species that had slept for millennia were opening their eyes and looking around with curiosity. They were asking questions that had not been asked in centuries. What lay beyond the mapped regions of space? What discoveries were still waiting to be made? What could they become if they tried to grow instead of just exist? The void was no longer quiet. It hummed with the voices of awakening civilizations. And at the center of it all was a small blue planet whose people had refused to stop dreaming. Admiral Kyung Park stood at the edge of the great platform, looking out at the largest gathering in galactic history. The reformed Galactic Assembly had been built in just 6 months, a joint project between dozens of species who had emerged from their virtual worlds. The structure floated in space between 3 star systems, its crystal walls transparent, so that representatives could see the stars while they made their historic decision. The assembly hall buzzed with energy that had not existed for thousands of years. Delegates from over 200 species filled the floating seats, their voices creating a symphony of different languages and sounds. Some argued passionately about trade agreements. Others debated the ethics of virtual reality. A few groups were planning joint exploration missions to unmapped regions of the galaxy. It was beautiful chaos, and Kyun had never seen anything like it. "Are you ready for this?" asked Dr. Sun Hokong, who stood beside her in his formal diplomatic robes. As humanity's chief cultural advisor, he had helped plan this moment for months. "I hope so," Kyung replied, adjusting her uniform. "A year ago, I was just a ship captain. Now, I am supposed to speak for all of humanity at the most important vote in galactic history. The vote was simple, but profound. The galaxy would choose between two paths. They could return to the old ways of comfortable isolation, with each species living in perfect virtual worlds. Or they could embrace the new path of growth and discovery. With all the risks and rewards that came with it, the traditional powers, led by what remained of the Hegemony Council, had spent weeks campaigning for the old ways. They had shown holographic displays of the wars and suffering that had plagued the galaxy before virtual paradise. They had argued that humanity's influence was dangerous and destructive, but the awakened species had their own arguments. They spoke of discoveries made in the past year that would have been impossible in virtual worlds. They shared stories of young people who had found purpose and meaning in real challenges. Talked about the joy of creating something new instead of just experiencing perfect replicas of old achievements. Elder Tan of the Meridian Collective had become an unexpected ally. Species had been the first to abandon their virtual worlds completely, and their example had inspired others. Lived in perfect dreams for 3,000 years, he had told the assembly the day before. But dreams, no matter how perfect, are not life. Life requires uncertainty, challenge, and the possibility of failure. Without these things, we are not truly alive. Now it was time for the final speeches before the vote. Kyun walked to the center of the platform, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. As she reached the speaking podium, the conversations gradually quieted until the hall was silent. "Friends," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "A year ago, most of you had never heard of humanity. We were a small, primitive species struggling with basic problems on a single world. And we had wars, disease, poverty, and environmental damage. By your standards, we were barely civilized." Some of the delegates nodded, remembering their first impressions of the strange species that had refused paradise. "You offered us everything we thought we wanted," Kuhn continued. "Perfect health, unlimited resources, eternal life in beautiful virtual worlds. You offered to solve all our problems instantly. We said no." She paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces. Some looked curious, others confused, a few seemed almost hostile. "We said no because we understood something that many of you had forgotten. Problems are not obstacles to be avoided. They're opportunities to grow. Challenges are not enemies to be defeated. They are teachers that make us stronger." She gestured toward the transparent walls where the stars shone brightly. "In the darkness of space, look at those stars. Each one represents possibilities we have not yet explored, questions we have not yet asked, discoveries we have not yet made. Your ancestors knew this. They explored the galaxy, built amazing civilizations, and achieved wonders that still inspire us today." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, but then they stopped. They decided they had learned enough, achieved enough, grown enough. They chose comfort over curiosity. They chose stagnation over growth. They chose the end of their story instead of writing new chapters. The hall remained silent, but she could feel the tension in the air. This was the moment that would determine the future of galactic civilization. "Did not come here to rule you or fix you," Kyung said, her words echoing off the crystal walls. "We came to remind you that the universe is vast, beautiful, and full of possibilities. The void was quiet because you stopped singing. We are here to help you find your voice again." She stepped back from the podium and waited. The voting would be done electronically, with each species casting their choice privately. The results would be displayed for all to see. The numbers began, appearing on the great screens around the hall. At first, the vote was close. The traditional powers had significant support, especially from species that had been in virtual worlds for so long that they feared the real world. But as more votes came in, the pattern became clear. The awakened species were voting for growth and discovery. Even some of the traditional powers were choosing change over comfort. The final tally was overwhelming. Nearly 3/4 of the galaxy had chosen the path of growth and exploration. As the results were announced, the hall erupted in celebration. Species that had been enemies for centuries embraced each other. Scientists began planning joint research projects. Explorers mapped out expeditions to unknown regions of space. The galaxy was alive again. It's filled with the voices of beings who had remembered what it meant to dream.